You have just taken the assessment. You have your scores in front of you. Now the question is, what do they actually mean? A number without a framework is just a number. What turns these scores into a development direction is understanding the patterns they reveal. You have your results, 3 scores across 3 dimensions. The question now isn't which score is highest or lowest, it's which gap between your intention and other people's experience is widest. That's a different question. Let's read these results correctly. Some of you will look at your scores and feel confirmed. Yes, that's what I suspected. Others will be surprised. Both reactions need addressing. If you feel confirmed, that's a good signal your self-awareness and the instrument agreed. But confirmation doesn't mean certainty. We're still building a hypothesis, not writing a verdict. If you're surprised, stay with that surprise for a moment. Don't dismiss it. The surprise itself is diagnostic information. It tells you something about the distance between your self-narrative and what the data picked up. We'll come back to that. On screen, you can see where the ACE assessment sits relative to the formal instruments. The Bates XPI measures broad presence dimensions but doesn't isolate gap type. Diagnose EQ diagnoses the expression gap specifically but misses authority and context. Profile XT targets the authority gap but has no multi-rater component. And 360-degree feedback surfaces the context gap through cross-rater variance. The ACE assessment provides a directional reading across all 3 dimensions. Your scores point toward the primary gap. The formal instruments confirm it with greater precision. The most common result pattern, one dimension scores notably lower than the other 2. Here's what that looks like. A Ku takes the ACE assessment. Her scores, authority 4.1, context 3.8, expression 2.4. The expression score stands out immediately. She reads it and nods. She's been told she's hard to read her entire career. Her team describes her as brilliant but distant. The assessment confirms what the feedback has been saying. Her internal processing is rich and her external display is minimal. Her primary gap is expression, and that means module 4 is where her development path begins. She also notes that context at 3.8 is lower than authority, a secondary signal worth tracking after the primary gap shows progress. But the priority is clear. Close the visibility gap first. Pattern 2 is where self-assessment reaches its limit. 2 or all 3 dimensions within a point of each other. A CHRO takes the assessment. His scores, authority 3.2, context 3.0, expression 3.1, all 3 within 2/10 of each other. He wants a clear answer, and the data won't give him one. But the close scores are themselves a finding. He needs 360-degree data to see which gap is widest from the outside. Remember the Uric finding. If 85 to 90% of people are less self-aware than they believe, some of the responses that felt honest are still filtered through the perception gap itself. When this CHRO pulls his 360 results in the next unit, the picture clarifies, ratings split by audience group, high from his HR team, low from the executive committee, pointing to a context gap his self-assessment couldn't surface. Pattern 3, your score doesn't match what you expected. A leader expected the authority gap to be primary but scored lowest on expression. That divergence between expectation and result warrants investigation, not dismissal. It could mean the self-assessment captured something your conscious self-narrative misses. It could also mean the questions were answered aspirationally despite the instructions. Either way, the mismatch is information, not error. The instinct to say the assessment got it wrong is itself worth examining. It may be evidence of the very blind spot the assessment is designed to surface. On screen, you can see the module path for each gap type. Let me connect these to what you already know. If your expression score is lowest, the work is visibility practice, making the internal external. In Module 2, Video 2.1, 1, you learned what the expression gap looks like. Module 4 gives you the exercises to close it. If authority is lowest, the work is register shift, moving from proving to projecting. Module 2, Video 2.2, 1 named this pattern. Module 5 targets the behavioral shift. If context is lowest, the work starts with organizational mapping. Module 2, Video 2.3, 1 introduced why context matters. Module 6 builds the diagnostic tools. But here's what the assessment does not tell you. It doesn't tell you how severe the gap is. It doesn't tell you how long closing it will take. It doesn't replace multi-rater instruments. What it does, it gives you a hypothesis to test. Look at your 3 scores right now. Which dimension scored lowest? Does that match what you expected based on the feedback you've received throughout your career? If it matches, you have a hypothesis. If it doesn't, that mismatch is worth investigating. Write down your primary gap hypothesis and the one piece of evidence from your career that either supports or challenges it. You'll test both in the next video. Self-reported improvement is unreliable for executive presence precisely because the core problem is a disconnect between internal experience and external perception. A hypothesis based on self-assessment is only the starting point. The real diagnostic power comes when you hold that hypothesis up against what other people see. That's what your 360 data is for, and that's where we're going next.